What if I told you that the reason you're not wealthy has nothing to do with your income and everything to do with a lie you tell yourself every single day? What if the greatest scam in modern history wasn't perpetrated by banks or governments, but by your own vocabulary? Here's the question nobody wants to answer. When was the last time you called yourself middle class? Yesterday? This morning? Right now, as you're reading this? Congratulations, you just locked yourself into a financial prison, and you handed the warden the key. Let me show you something that happened in March 2025 that nobody talked about. The Federal Reserve published a study, buried on page 47 of their quarterly report, that revealed a staggering truth. 72% of Americans who earn between $50,000 and $150,000 per year identify as middle class. But here's the kicker. When they analyzed the actual spending patterns, debt loads, and net worth of these people, they discovered something horrifying. They weren't middle class. They were broke. They had negative net worth when you subtracted their liabilities. They were living paycheck to paycheck with a better credit score. The median American household that calls itself middle class has $8,300 in savings and $38,000 in debt, not counting their mortgage. They drive a car worth $35,000 that they owe $27,000 on. They live in a house worth $300,000 with a mortgage of $270,000. On paper, they own assets. In reality, the bank owns them. But the truly wealthy, the people in the top 7%, they never use that phrase. They don't call themselves middle class. They don't call themselves upper class. They don't participate in the classification system at all. Why? Because they understand something that was taught in a single economics lecture at Stanford in September 2025 by Professor Rebecca Chen. She called it the pyramid of financial identity. It's not about how much money you make. It's about which level of the pyramid you psychologically occupy. And once you understand these 7 levels, you can never unsee it. Level 1 is the labeler. This is where 90% of the population lives. They obsess over class labels. Am I working class, middle class, upper middle class? They define themselves by a bracket, by a category, by a comparison to everyone around them. The labeler's entire financial identity is external. They look at their neighbor's car and think, we're the same class. They look at their coworker's salary and think, we're in this together. But here's the trap. The moment you accept a label, you accept the limitations that come with it. Middle-class people are supposed to have mortgages. Middle-class people are supposed to finance cars. Middle-class people are supposed to retire at 65 with enough money to not be a burden. The label becomes the cage. In April 2025, a viral TikTok trend called "What Class Are You Really?" asked people to calculate their net worth minus their debts and compare it to their income. The comment sections were brutal. People earning 6 figures were discovering they had the net worth of someone making minimum wage. One woman in Phoenix, a nurse earning $92,000 a year, calculated her actual net worth at negative $14,000. She had student loans, a car payment, credit card debt, and $1,800 in her checking account. She called herself middle class her entire adult life. The label was a lie. She was, by every financial metric, insolvent. But the label let her pretend otherwise. Level 2 is the earner. These are people who've graduated from caring about class labels to caring about income labels. They say things like, I'm a 6-figure earner. I make $200K a year. They've shifted their identity from class to income. This feels like progress, but it's a lateral move. They're still trapped because they've tied their worth to a paycheck. The earner lives in constant fear of losing their income. They optimize for salary. They chase raises. They job hop for 20% bumps. And every single decision they make is filtered through the question, how does this affect my earning potential? Here's what happened to earners in 2025. In June, a data leak from LinkedIn's internal analytics revealed that professionals who switched jobs for higher salaries ended up less happy than those who stayed put, but only if they increased their spending proportionally with their income. The study tracked 60,000 job switchers over 5 years. The ones who jumped from 80,000 to 120,000 and immediately bought a nicer car and moved to a more expensive apartment reported lower life satisfaction than they had at 80,000. They made more money, but they didn't make progress. They just upgraded their financial hamster wheel. Level 3 is the optimizer. This is where people start waking up. The optimizer has read the books. They know about compound interest. They max out their 401k. They have a Roth IRA. They listen to podcasts about index funds. They use apps to track their spending. They've done the math, and the math says they'll be fine in 30 years. The problem? 30 years. The optimizer is playing a game designed by someone else, following rules written in 1974, optimizing for a retirement that keeps getting pushed further away. In 2025, the average retirement age in America hit 67, up from 62 just 10 years ago. Social Security is projected to run dry by 2034. The game the optimizer is playing is rigged. They're winning by the old rules, while the new rules are being written in invisible ink. Level 4 is the allocator. Now we're getting interesting. The allocator doesn't just earn and save, they allocate. They understand that money has jobs. They don't see a savings account, they see tranches: emergency fund, opportunity fund, depreciation buffer. The allocator has read the studies. In August 2025, MIT researchers published findings that showed households that practiced intentional allocation, assigning specific purposes to every dollar, built net worth 43% faster than households with identical incomes who just saved generically. Why? Because allocation creates accountability. When your money has a name, you can't accidentally spend it. But here's where the allocator still fails. They're allocating earned income. They're still trading time for money and then managing that money efficiently. They've optimized the inputs, but they haven't changed the equation. Level 5 is the structurer. This is the level where everything shifts. The structurer doesn't just allocate their own money. They structure how money flows to them. They understand legal entities. They know the difference between being paid as a W-2 employee versus a 1099 contractor, versus owning an S-corp, versus having a trust. They've learned that the tax code isn't a wall, it's a menu. In October 2025, investigative journalists at ProPublica revealed that the top 1% of earners pay an effective tax rate of 23%, while upper middle-class earners, the ones making between $200,000 and $400,000, pay an effective rate of 31%. How is that possible? Structure. The wealthy don't earn income, they generate returns. They don't get paychecks, they get distributions. The structurer learns the language of the system and uses it. Level 6 is the multiplier. The multiplier has cracked the code that school never taught. Money isn't something you earn and save, it's something you multiply. The multiplier understands leverage, not in the reckless sense, but in the mathematical sense. They know that $1 working in the right system can become $5 without them lifting a finger. In November 2025, an economic analysis from the University of Chicago showed that wealthy households generate 68% of their annual net worth increase from asset appreciation and income-producing assets, not from salaries. The multiplier doesn't work harder. They architect systems where money works for them. They buy things that pay them. They structure deals where they win even if they do nothing. Level 7 is the sovereign. This is the level most people never even know exists. The sovereign doesn't participate in the economy the way you do. They don't think in terms of income or net worth or returns. They think in terms of freedom, optionality, and legacy. The sovereign has enough resources that they've exited the game of financial survival and entered the game of financial creation. They don't ask, "Can I afford this?" They ask, "Does this align with my vision?" In December 2025, wealth psychologists published a study showing that individuals with a net worth above $10 million report fundamentally different anxiety patterns than those below that threshold. Below 10 million, people worry about losing what they have. Above 10 million, people worry about what they're building. The fear shifts from scarcity to legacy. But here's the secret. You don't need $10 million to think like the sovereign. You just need to stop thinking like the labeler. The greatest wealth transfer in history isn't happening because of inflation or markets or policy. It's happening because a small group of people stopped accepting the labels society gave them and started building their own definitions. They stopped calling themselves middle class. They stopped comparing themselves to neighbors. They stopped playing the game everyone else plays. What level are you on right now? Be honest. Are you still calling yourself middle class? Are you still tying your identity to a paycheck? Are you still optimizing inside a box someone else built? The pyramid is real. The levels are real. And the only way to climb is to stop pretending you're not at the bottom. Subscribe and leave a comment. Tell me which level you're on and which level you're moving to. This conversation doesn't end here. It starts here.